Welcome to the Startup Grind.
Good Abend. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us for this first Startup Grind of 2015. And also, it's nice to see the two same protagonists we used for our launch event last year. And to make it very short, for those who are here for the first time, Startup Grind has not the ambition or mission or value, but would like to educate entrepreneurship. This means we try to find interesting personalities who have done their way or who are on the process of doing their way and who are willing to share them. And instead of having a boring or not so boring presentation or a round table and so on, it's in the format of fireside chats. This means there's always one person who knows this personality who will talk to this personality and do an interview, in fact. This generally is around 30 minutes, and afterwards the floor is open to questions. And tonight we would like to thank our partners, our event partner Lux Future Lab, for hosting us and also hosting afterwards the marvelous reception on the last floor, on the top floor. And we would also thank our supporting partners, without whom Startup Grind Luxembourg would not be possible. It's not in a specific order, but I try to make them in alphabetical order. It's BPM for all our postal address and mailings. Then we have Link, which are supporting us also with marketing and so on. We have MixVoip. The phone numbers you are ringing and sometimes you're not getting through because you fall on the voicemail. That's MixVoip. And then, of course, we also have a marvelous partner which is sponsor my event, where if you like to support us more, you can click on the link and then you're immediately taken to their page where you can select the nice package. And tonight also we have a media partner, which is Cross Media 360. This is the Gazette, the Luxembourg Business Gazette, which you have seen in the entrance, and afterwards you are invited also to take a copy with them. So that was it from my side, and I would like to thank the partner Lux Future Lab and Mrs. Chinchen for hosting us, and eventually say a few welcome words.
So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Lux Future Lab. I'll be really short, just to thank Steve for bringing over such a great crowd. It's very nice to see you here. And I have a second thing to tell you that as of actually end of this week, Lux Future Lab is going to move. So we will move with our 17 startups. We are now 17 startups, 170 people. We move to the other side of the street, the 3 houses there. And yes, we would love to welcome you there. It was a really nice location, and we hope that one of the next startup grinds will then be at that location. So enjoy the evening, and we are all excited to hear what you guys have to say. Give the mic to you.
Yes. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Steve. So today I think will be quite interesting. I know Michael since a few years, well, actually more than a few years, and I'm very impressed by your road, by your way, what you did, and I think that today we will a little bit try to find out what drives you, what passions you, and what your take is on entrepreneurship and the tech industry. So we have quite a lot to cover in these 30 minutes. So let's go a little bit on your background. So you started a little bit entrepreneur, then in-house COO, then investor. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I'm old, so the story is long. I'm an engineer by background. I studied electronic engineering, and I was working in a computer company really quite at the beginning of computer technology and learning to program and stuff like that. And then I decided one day I wouldn't be doing computer programming. It didn't interest me. I liked to play with radios, amateur radio and these sort of things. I left university with a degree in radio engineering, if you like, I went to work for the BBC in London. And I was there for 2 years or 3 years or something. But you know, the BBC is a funny organisation. You go into the state organisation and you almost have your career planned for the whole of your life, knowing that probably now I would have a nice pension or something someplace and be able to sleep in my garden. And that was a bit boring. So I left to join a startup radio company and went on through there with various telecommunication businesses in Scandinavia. We were one of the first to launch something, Internet for the People, we called it. I think it's important that technology is made accessible to normal people. It used to be the privilege of the elite and the privilege of rich people, but democratization of technology is really important. So we were the first to launch a dial-up internet service, and that was with Niklas Enstrom, who went on to...
So that was Tele2 already back then, or what was that?
Yeah, that was Tele2, which was in 1997, which is a long time ago still. And that was, of course, a Luxembourgish company, the head office in Bertrange. So I was working out there, had a desk there, and we took this product and we launched it through to various...
So I understand that actually out of there you covered a few countries where you started different ventures throughout Europe.
Yes, exactly. I mean, the job was to start, we called it Tele2 Europe. Tele2 was a Swedish company, but they wanted to expand. And we went there into basically 26 countries across Europe, and I was responsible for establishing.
And then you met founders of the Casa, who had to close Casa, and who came up with a great idea called Skype. How did they convince you to join them?
Well, actually, it was funny. I was working for Tele2, and for those who know the history of the company, the owner, the master behind it, Mr. Steenbeck, Jan Steenbeck, he lived in the farm out in Bertrange, and he died one day. And, of course, that was very unfortunate, not least because he had about 1,700 companies, I think, to his name then. 1,700, a huge number. It was a total, I won't say a total mess, because it wasn't a messy, but he had everything in his head. 4 listed companies he was running. And so what happens, of course, all us people doing these strange projects, what do you do next? You know, what happens? So off we went. And I was working on some projects still, rolling out Tele2. And then one day I was sitting at home and I was watching the morning TV news, and I saw the face of my old colleague, Niklas Enstrom, who launched Skype at that point. And I thought, wow, this is amazing. This sounds really good. I'd followed a little bit what they were doing. I knew what they were doing with the Kazaa and things, but not directly. And I saw it, and I thought, wow, this is amazing. And I said to my dear wife, who's here, I said, this is interesting. I must get in touch with them. But I think what finally convinced me was one thing, is if you're sitting in the morning, at 10 o'clock in the morning, watching morning TV, maybe you should be doing something else.
So did you reach out to him? Did he reach out to you? Did you reach out to him?
I called him straight away. I called him immediately on his telephone, and we met, and
That was really still in the very early days.
That was the day after the launching.
After the launching,
yeah.
So you were really part of the team, nearly day zero, having grown up. So a little bit about that experience. That's really like a tremendous experience to grow something to become that big.
It is. It's great at different levels. I mean, obviously it's amazing to be part of a project which was economically successful. That's good. But it's also a project which has changed the way that people communicate across the world. You've heard this a lot. But I mean, now we do. We were the first company to do a very easy way of communicating, across the world, one click. All this technology existed before. We didn't really invent such a whole amount. There was the peer-to-peer model from Kazaa. There was the voice over IP was quite well established at that point. But you had to be a super technical expert to make it work, and of course nobody could do that.
So your role was COO. Was your title back then? What does that mean inside Skype to be COO?
Yes. So COO, the job of a COO is to manage the operating side of the company, I think, rather than the product vision, if you want to call it that. So it's to manage what goes on there, to manage the finances, to manage all the legal stuff, but that's boring, right? But there's a lot of, when you're in a transformational company, there's a lot of legal stuff happening, which is not just filling in the forms for the Chamber of Commerce or something. It's you're dealing with regulators who think this thing is illegal or not illegal or maybe illegal or what it is, and having to have really quite advanced discussions with people. You see this happening a lot in the virtual currency space today, for example, where there's continuous discussions between everybody about how much this is to be allowed. And that's part of the responsibility there, as well as managing the systems and back-end systems and hosting and all this kind of stuff that businesses need.
So tell us a little bit about that exit of Skype. Everybody heard so many times. Actually, I think there were 2 exits of Skype.
Yes, well, I mean, if you're going to do something once, you might as well do it more than once if it's successful. So the first one was interesting. We were in 2005, and yes, in 2005, in July. And we went to dinner with, or to lunch with the founder of eBay, Pierre Omidyar, and Meg Whitman, the CEO, and a couple of other guys. We went to a lunch with them in London, and you don't really know why you're going to lunch. You just come to lunch, so you come to lunch. And we were all there, and it turned out we were involved in this process, and it had been very fortunate for everybody. We were lucky because there was a kind of, we were showing fantastic growth, and I think that's one thing that if you have a small company that's starting, I mean, there's nothing better than growth to impress investors and staff and people coming to join you, and also people are going to buy you. And so we showed this fantastic growth, and we could paint a picture that the growth we had could continue forever. Skype was unheard of in America. We didn't go to America. The whole file sharing story you read about was very much, well, I don't know if the word's illegal, but certainly troublesome in America, and we had no presence there, so they never heard of it. But they're impressed with the growth rates of the company, and we did something which I hate, which is we pay lawyers and bankers a lot of money to go through a process, and I think I learned then that sometimes you can't do everything yourself. You have to pay people, experts, to do things for you, and it's a bit unfortunate to give bankers 5% of what you do or something, but sometimes they actually earn the money. And you go through an acquisition process, and we were lucky that the other people, Google and whoever it was, Microsoft and Yahoo, and the people who were the big companies of the internet then and still are, were interested in the company, and they managed to get the bidding going. And of course, as you know, if you buy anything, if the bidding is going, then the price goes up. So you go from a normal price to an elevated price, which is useful.
So you're saying that this lunch was a trigger for you to go to an M&A and make a serious process. Okay, very good. So you didn't take the first bit. Excellent.
No, we went through a serious process, and I think there's a point exactly where you say you have to so often manage the situation, manage the process yourself. If you just wait for things to come, they just come and you la through life and it's all good. But sometimes you have to say, okay, this is the process, this is the day, this is what we're going to do, and work towards it. Because if you set yourself this goal of on the 1st of August we're going to have this, well, finished or something, then at least everybody's going in the same direction. And I think it wouldn't happen if you just say, oh, we'll listen to these guys, then we'll go and listen to some other guys and so on.
So after you sold the first time, did you stay in the company?
Yes.
Or, yes,
I did. I stayed some time. I stayed with eBay for some time. eBay's a great company. It's an interesting company because it's not it lost its sort of trendiness, if you want to call it, but it's a fantastic company. At the time there, I remember some figures. I didn't really know eBay either. We didn't have much eBay in Europe, in Luxembourg, in Denmark, where I was also living. There was no eBay. But then you learn with the management there that there were 1 million people at that point, I think, professionally living off the stuff they were selling through eBay. 1 million people. That's a lot. And that company's actually really powerful. And naturally, staying in an organization like that, with that user base, with that organization, it's fantastic.
How come there is the synergies? Everybody thought, well, we will have a Skype button now in every eBay account. So why did that not happen?
There were 2 things, I think, there. There was a synergy project called the Power of 3. I remember it. PayPal, Skype, and eBay. And the idea was that by having people who are selling stuff being able to talk to each other, it would enable commerce. You usually like to speak to the shopkeeper when you go in the shop, discuss the product. And obviously if you're selling an iPhone or something, nobody cares. But if you're selling a tractor or something like this, then maybe you want to talk about this tractor. Or is it old? Is it new? What it is? And so they wanted to put the ability to communicate directly on the site and without having to give away your phone number and all of these sort of things. But the reality was they rolled it out and nobody really wanted to talk to the other people. So maybe it was true in some sectors, but it didn't really happen. And of course you learn then, and what many people know is that working within large organizations with millions of people and all the demands from everything from customer service through legal and fraud and payments and all these things, it's extremely big and complex to put three things together in a massive organization.
So what happened then? Why did it got sold the second time?
So then it got sold to, so I left at this point, and then I got bored with it all. It was all getting a bit complicated. But the company continued and was sold to Silver Lake. Silver Lake is a private equity house. Now, private equity is a different function than venture capital, which maybe we come into later, or angel investing, maybe we come into that later. Private equity, they buy something, they see the asset, they know how to, if you like, repackage the company and make it very saleable. And all their focus is really pushing it, getting it nice and big and growing and putting a professional team in it. They're an American that an awful lot of money to put behind it, and they managed to do that. And over the period of time, they grew it from whatever the number is, $3 billion to $8 billion or something like this in the sales price, where they sold it to Microsoft, who wanted the product for to build into the operating system and things, which they continue to do, and I think it's fine.
Great, thank you. Let's get back then to you. When you left, did you go to Mangrove directly?
I did. So Mangrove was an early investor in Skype, was one of the first investors. I don't think they even knew what they were getting into, but I met them through the process. And, at the time when I was looking around for something else to do or whatever, the time was right, the guys at Mangrove came to me and said, would you like to come and join us here? So I did. That's the long and short of it. It wasn't a very complicated process. It was convenient. I'd enjoyed working with them through the process and so on. Yeah.
So you became partners straight away?
Yeah,
yes?
Yeah, in the venture capital company, exactly. Venture capital is different too.
Yeah. And so what does it mean to be partner at Mangrove? Is it assessing? Is it searching? Is it be responsible for deal flow? Is it be for everything? What does it mean?
So Mangroves and most venture capital companies are small companies in this sense. We have 12 people altogether, I think, something like this. Half of them are involved with what you might call back office work and one thing and another, and half of us are involved in front office, which in our case is looking for projects, is trying to find projects, screen projects, and manage the projects that we have within the house already. So
it's a full track per partner, a little bit. You're responsible. You have certain specialities?
Yeah, I mean, every person in the world is good at some things and not so good at other things. So the things I do, or while we are invested in a company, you can be looking at it, and I'll be looking at some aspects, others of my colleagues will be looking at other aspects of it. And when we're running the company, or while we don't run the company, the entrepreneurs run the company, but while we're monitoring the company and theoretically helping, then depending on the time of life of the company, you will bring out different people to help. So some will be more operational. I'm a more practical person involved with a lot of running the company. If we get into sort of acquisition and contracts and stuff like that, other people will more step into the situation.
So you just said that different partners look at different aspects. So what are your aspects? What drives you? What are you looking, especially when you go for an investment?
Well, I'm hoping that the investment, the project, can genuinely be a large company. I think we want to do that. We've done it before. It's not interesting for me to be involved in a company which is just going to be a local company doing something nice. And there are plenty of companies that do that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that, with having a company which is doing well, earns a lot of money, good money for the people who are working there and owning the company. It's fine. But for us, we want something international. And I look at the companies that I've seen. I've been very fortunate working with eBay and the tops of Google and meeting the top guys at Facebook and all these companies which you meet. And that's where I want to be. It's difficult to be there, of course. Nobody says it's easy, but if you don't try, you won't get there. And not everything works out, of course. In fact, very few things work out the way you intend. But anyway, that's the idea.
What is more important, the idea, the concept, the business plan, or the team? What?
It's the people. It's always the people in the end. As much as one likes to, and I think a danger is you enjoy the project, you look at the project, say, wow, that would be amazing if that worked, whatever that is. And there are a lot of projects like that. But in the end, it's the way the people are able to get stuff done, right? It's the most important for us. It really is. And it's very difficult sometimes to hang on that. And very often the reason the investment doesn't go through is not because the idea is bad, for example. It's just that for some reason we don't, I'm going to say, like the team. Like can be technically like, we don't think that they're capable of doing what they want to do, or we just don't like them. That can also be fine. If you're going to work with somebody for 7, 8, 10 years, I mean, you want to be able to be in the same room as him.
So how strong is the deal flow? How many files do we have to look per day?
Per day, well, last year we had about nearly 4,000 files come in. So per day you can work that out. It's very, very difficult because they come through all sorts of sources, of course. I mean, I'll meet people here with an idea, for sure. They'll come on the email, they'll come on the telephone, they'll come through third parties, they'll come in some people even write in old-fashioned, even with a pen occasionally, and all of this, and you get pinged through. You know, we all have all these social media channels now with Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn, and these messages come through, hey, Michael, would you like to look at this, or for my colleagues. Very, very difficult to manage and keep on top of it, I must say.
So you do a first filter down, and then how does it afterwards go? It goes in the committee, or what? How does it continue?
So the process is we do, basically, if you capture my attention, then I have to capture one of my colleagues' attention, and then the two of us look at it, and gradually we bring the whole team in. So everybody has to think this is a nice idea, a good idea. It doesn't mean everybody has to be 100% agreed on everything, but that's the idea. Yeah.
But in the end, unanimity or veto for one partner?
It's a unanimous committee decision. So, and it's very important, I think, if you're working in a small group of people, we don't apportion the investments to individuals particularly, and we don't hold anybody accountable directly if it doesn't work, because in our business most of the projects don't work. So we can't have, all the time, oh, it's you, oh, and none of your projects work, and all of that, because it's a bit random anyway, most of this stuff. So we try and keep it fair.
Once you decide to invest in a project, what happens then? I saw, for instance, is there some synergy, some logic behind it, or you want to be smart money, you want to offer more than just money? What's the logic? What happens once invested?
It really depends on the founder, on the team behind it. I mean, some of the guys get on with it and never call, which is fine. Some guys call every 5 minutes, which is also fine, kind of. And so on. It depends a lot on the people, and if they want us to come, we come. If they don't want us to come, we don't, obviously. We will never force our way, and there's a big difference between venture capital, for example, where we make ourselves available, but we have a lot of projects and we have plenty to do. If you look towards the private equity side, for example, when they're really concentrated, they spend a lot of money buying this company, and it has to be successful. They can afford 0 failure. It has to be at least moderately successful. So they just put their people in, and they recruit experts from around the world to do it. We don't necessarily do that, but on the other hand, what we do want to do is to encourage the founder. The founder of a company is actually quite lonely. When you're sitting on top of a company, it's difficult, especially as it starts to become successful, because you have a lot of employees, you have a lot of responsibility to them, you have a lot of responsibility to financial institutions, to your customers and all of that. And your friends you grow up with, maybe they think you're a bit crazy, so they're difficult to relate to. And even your family, even if they're supportive, they still, you probably know more than I do about this. And it's important to have somebody to talk to, and I think that's part of the role of a supportive investor, is to be that sounding board and confidential sounding board for the manager, the owner, the founders of the company. I think it's really important.
Let's address a little bit now the tech industry. What's the buzzwords? What are all VCs looking for right now? Is it like, well, virtual currencies? Is it drones? Is it Internet of Things? What is driving you? What is the focus on?
Well, the word of the market now is fintech, financial technology, which is interesting, I think, for this region particularly. And then these famous wearables, as they call them, whatever wearables are, and drones, which everybody's excited about. I think everybody's excited about drones because they're kind of cool and sexy and I don't know what. Nobody really, I mean, there are a lot of practical uses for it and there'll be big companies built up of it, but I think it's more headline than anything. Wearables, which are all these gadgets you have, you know, we've all tried these fitness monitoring things and health monitoring things and what have you. Watches are the new thing, but we're not seeing a lot of that activity in Europe, to be honest. Internet of Things is another thing which is very industrial. I mean, I have had quite a lot of experience playing with all of these gadgets, and all of the new ones don't work, and all of the old ones do. And if you want to be running your house or your movie theatre or something with gadgets, it's sometimes better to use the system from, it's horrible to say this, but from Siemens or Schneider or somebody like this, than some gadget from Silicon Valley which works for 2 months. And then the house goes to sleep. But financial technology is really important because this is a sector where, like the telecommunications industry, there's a lot of, I hate to say it in the bank building here, but I'm going to say it anyway, where the banks, particularly since the crisis of 2007-8, there were a lot of consolidation within the banks. They were buying each other up and everything, changing their brand name, and they have a great difficulty in going out to customers with a consistent product because, in fact, there are 15 different banks under the same brand. The brand of, you know, BNP or ING or something has bought all sorts of stuff and changed its name. None of the IT systems work together because they just don't. So we're going to see the same sort of disruption or same sort of new product development in the financial sector as we see in the telecommunications sector. And there are lots of different hierarchies on that, everything from lending, investment platforms, transaction platforms, and so on. We saw one yesterday from one of my...
I saw the interview you had on TechCrunch Disrupt 2013 with the Bitcoin guys of Bitstamp. So that was back then, and you were on stage and you said that you had not invested in any Bitstamp and virtual currency company. Did you do meanwhile?
No. I've invested a lot of time in them. But I have not found... I actually think we're at the beginning, which is a great time to be investing. But where we're at the beginning now is people on something which you call exchanges, which is where people are basically putting money in and converting it into these coins and storing them there and converting them out. And for me, that's not interesting. I have this fundamental interest in the technology around it, what's underneath this Bitcoin, this blockchain, as it's called, which is a completely open... You should read about it. There's lots of stuff about it. And for me, it can change a lot of things around into the future. It just is a public ledger of reliability, of trust, if you like. And at the moment, it's being applied to an instrument, a thing called a currency unit, but it can be applied to documents and things like this. So I think the notarial system is, we all know here, is nothing other than I'm going to be unpopular, but I think here I'm not unpopular. It's nothing other than a cost with a rather small benefit, in fact. And this can be replaced by technology. It's antiquated, and so on and so on and so on. Many, many systems. And because it's public, I think if you were to develop a company around a private notarial system, nobody would want to join it. Same as these currencies. Developing one alone, like PayPal did, is okay, but it's kind of theirs. You had to have this generic platform to build on. I think is the genius behind it.
I fully agree. Now we talked about in the next place what you're looking for as a technology. When you invest now, let's talk about places. What are the countries why not so much Luxembourg, and why so much other places, and which places?
So there's two answers to that. One is when you raise a fund, and we run a business, and we don't get our money from the air. We have to go to investors to get our money, so we have to go to the market and we have to tell them what we're investing in. And you say, well, we're investing in technology, that's great. Where? We're investing in Europe, and so on. So we have already in our sales documentation limited ourselves or specified what we're going to be doing. And in our case, it's Europe, it's Russia, and it's Israel. So, and when we talk about Europe, we mean sort of the whole bigger area, sort of from halfway across the Atlantic into the Russian states and what have you, and down to Israel. And we can do other things. We've invested in India as well to some extent, but our majority is there. Now, then when you start to split up where Europe is, well, to be frank, you also have to recognize your weaknesses as well as your strengths. And London is an area where there's about 150,000 venture capital companies. And us being competitive in London is going to be difficult. So we don't do an awful lot in London, but we do in the rest of Europe. So we invest in any country in Europe, and it can be from Finland to Portugal and Israel to wherever.
No specific country where you have best experience, where you see really a strongest drive?
I would say no, and I think my friend Nicholas in our competitor Atomico, another venture capital company, just did a research report, and there's been more of these $1 billion internet companies outside Silicon Valley than in Silicon Valley. It's a strange thing. You think it's all in Silicon Valley because this is where Facebook and Google and this and that are, but there's tons of companies outside there. And then when you start to look at, are these in clusters, the answer is not really. They're kind of everywhere. I mean, Skype was in Estonia, there's the stuff going on. Rovio is in Finland, Spotify is in Sweden. You can just go country by country, right, around the different countries as to what's doing. Zendesk was in Denmark. Germany's full of stuff because it's a big country, and so on and so on.
Well, let's talk about these unicorns, these $1 billion companies. You had 2 unicorns so far. Huh? You call this VIX Fund also falls under that. So that's actually an amazing track record for a VC of that size. Do you have a third one, you think, in your portfolio?
Yeah. I think more than one. You have to believe it, you know. If you don't believe it, it's never going to happen. Somebody has to believe it. I don't think I want to go on the record and say which one, because you tell me next time. But we've certainly got valuations kicking around these levels now. It's unusual, but it's possible, and it is quite possible. And one of the reasons I think it is possible, $1 billion internet companies are quite rare. But the internet so far has focused on basically media and communications. And the media and communications sectors, entertainment, media, communication, books, films, music, all of this stuff, survived news through the internet, is a relatively small sector of the economy compared with transportation, compared with healthcare, compared with construction, compared with all of this. And you can be a very, very big media company, a massive world-dominant media company, and you're probably the size of Yahoo or something, which is a decent-sized company, or was, and so on. But there are companies this size in construction who are just normal companies almost of this size. So when we see the technology which we have in our pockets, we all have these smartphones in our pocket, which are immensely powerful, and everybody has one. I mean, there isn't a person in our society who doesn't have one. So even the builders and the laborers and the construction guys has got one in his pocket. Well, when the applications reach them for their trade, then we're going to see, I think, huge companies. And they're going to be more and more kind of niche-y and tools and things like that, because people pay money for tools. People don't pay money for news. Nobody cares about the news. They care about it, but they don't pay. Whereas if you have a tool, if you're, a plumber guy, just to say that helps him do his work somehow. I don't know what it is. And the guy who's going to invent that isn't going to be me or a kid in Silicon Valley. It's going to be a plumber. It's going to be a guy who knows that trade and he knows that construction work and everything. And he can come from anywhere. He could come from here. He could come from India. He could come from wherever. He probably doesn't come from a rich Stanford educated family in Silicon Valley, right? There are not many plumbers there.
So, is there a what's next, or you feel home at Mangrove and you feel happy?
I feel very happy at Mangrove. We've launched now our 4th fund. One of the things you offer to your investors when you go to the market, a fund lasts 10 years. So you have 10 years to get your money in, find companies, invest it, sell the companies, give the money back, basically. That's the model. So when you go to the investors, you say, I'm going to be here for 10 years. That's what you commit to doing. You say, I'm going to be here, I enjoy it, this is what I'm going to do. And you look them in the face and say, I'm going to be here a long time. So these jobs are not stepping stones into something else. They're what you are comfortable with. And it takes a time to become comfortable, and you won't be accepted. I was lucky to come into this because they knew me, but you won't get into a fund sort of this way. It takes a bit of time. It's a bit strange, a brotherhood a bit.
Nice. So you travel a lot. Where do you live, actually?
Yeah, that's a question. It's an easy question, isn't it? I live in Luxembourg. We have an apartment here in the city. We have a summer house in Denmark. My wife's from Denmark. My family have grown up in Denmark. And I have a house in the south of France also, which is a lot nicer at this time of year. It's lucky, isn't it, to be able to choose a little bit of that. But it's all of those locations are good for transport, or relatively good for transport. We know Luxembourg it's okay to get places. It's not the best, but the Nice and Copenhagen are nice, and that's good because we have to. The difference between a company like ours in Luxembourg and one in London is nobody rings the doorbell here passing, right? It's a fact of life in Luxembourg that you have to go and look for the work. You have to go and look for the companies, look for the customers. But we're used to it. I guess everybody in Luxembourg has grown up that way. So
yeah. So let's ask one question about Luxembourg. What would you see as for investors' perspective, what Luxembourg should do to attract either more investors? Or
you mean more money, more investment money, or something like
yes.
that? I think one of the things I see now is this growing. This is a different thing. I'm not an economist, but I read so much now about this inequality in the world, which seems to be the feature of Davos last week, of Mr. Piketty and his famous book of last year. And apparently all the rich people are getting richer and the poor people are getting poorer. And I think we need to offer security for the people who do have money to invest, to deploy. And that means they want long-term security for their cash. They want to be able to deploy it into funds, to know it's not going to be taken away. We had a terrible example. This is in Cyprus. We have a company registered in Cyprus. We invest a lot in Russia, and they do it through Cyprus because the Russian banking system doesn't really work. So they have their accounts all in Cyprus. And when that crisis happened, the Cyprus, they just took the money. They just took it. And it's gone. So you're running a company and you have your money in your bank account to pay the salaries and everything, and then it's not there anymore. I mean, what the hell do you do? I mean, it really is what the hell do you do? It's not really very much fun. You go home tonight and you look in your bank account and there's nothing there. It's no good. And so we have to be sure that we're not moving in the direction of confiscation of capital or whatever you want to call it.
I think last one, when you invest now in company, do you suggest them to move to Luxembourg? Are you convinced about Luxembourg for the company, or what do you tell them?
I would not suggest anybody move anywhere. I think to build a company is difficult wherever you are. And you need the support of your local environment generally. And you need to be able to recruit your friends, your colleagues, the people who know you, the people who have a reputation with it. So if you live in, I don't know, Rostock or something, I mean, you're there. This is a better place for you than even maybe Silicon Valley if you know everybody. And you're the king of Rostock. It's the best place to build companies. And so I wouldn't suggest people explicitly moving here I wouldn't insist on them moving here, let me put it that way. But to come here is of course good. I mean, we have a small startup environment, we have a safe environment, and of course living here is as we all know, is fine. So we don't insist on anybody moving anywhere.
So maybe to finish, a word of wisdom for people that want to be able to manage to raise money from Mangrove?
Yeah, well, come with a project which has got these worldwide scope, I think. It's quite simple, really. I want to be able to imagine everybody using your product. I mean, the good thing about the Skype is everybody uses it. One of the most meaningful... You have some small memories of these projects, and one I remember a lot, which is I was taking the train out of London to the airport on this Heathrow Express thing one night, and it was raining and it was cold and it was horrible and dark. And I was sitting on the jump seat kind of outside the toilet because there was no room, I remember. And there was a girl that's lying on the floor there with her laptop open, and she was talking to her friend using the Skype. And she was just a young girl sitting, and I thought, wow, this is neat. And that's the sort of project that I love. And if you can do that and get that reach into people's lives, that's absolutely incredible. Try and do that if you don't do anything else. And if you make money, you make money.
Thank you, Michael. I think we will open questions to the floor. Are you going with the microphone around?
Yeah. Let's start there.
And ask Xavier also. Yeah, just here.
Thank you very much. So first of all, you probably agree that you've probably never invested in a company where you received an email or written letter. So normally, I think the real good projects, you find them yourself or it's suggested by somebody you know. Also with your Skype experience, flipping it a little bit, not from the seat of a private investor, but from the company side. You know, who should you accept money from?
Yeah, anybody. Raising money is is not to be underestimated. It's incredibly difficult. I have two words of advice. First, take all the money you can when it's available. Don't try and be too clever about that in general. And secondly, who would you take it from? Well, if you're fortunate to have a choice, then you want to take it from probably the most professional and experienced investor that you can. And there's a lot of angel investors who have a good portfolio. Should you take it from your family? That's a personal thing, recognizing there's a good possibility that it goes wrong, because it is just the way. So if you take money from your family, then be aware of that. I would take it if you're in the lucky position of being able to choose the most professional and the people you like best. I think it's difficult to say you've got a. Somebody asked about the value add of the investor. You asked me about that. Somebody. You asked about the value add of the investor, and it's limited if you're a good operator. The investor has a limited. He's a cheerleader, but sometimes he can make some connections. But there was this whole story about who's got the biggest Rolodex, for example. It used to be the story 20 years ago, but now everybody has access to LinkedIn. So I mean, if you want to know who's the sales manager at Siemens, you just look it up on the internet now. You don't really need to. Getting an introduction is good, of course, but yeah.
Yeah, so actually I have two questions. The first one, you were mentioning that one of the most important things you're looking up in a company is the team. Could you specify a bit more what kind of things or what kind of attributes are looking into to find into the founders team?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, just general competence, that they know the market that they're going into, they know what they're doing, they have skills in it. I think the projects that have worked well around the world are with people who have some experience from the industry, even if it's an industry they're disrupting. And I think we're going to see that in the financial technologies. The team is going to come, half of the team is probably going to come out of a development department of a bank, for example, just to say something. And the other half might be some crazy guy who doesn't know anything about banks, which is probably good, because he's not then restricted by his thinking convention. And that's part of it. The team is more than one person, generally, complementing each other, I think it's fair to say. And they can sell. So a startup is all about selling. You have to sell your vision to investors. You have to sell your vision to guys who are going to come and work for you. We're going to put their jobs and their family life on the line because it's a startup, it's risky. You have to be able to really convince them. Your customers in the beginning are going to be taking a chance, especially if it's a trade customer, to go with a startup who's got no, it's easier to buy from IBM, everybody used to say, and so on. So the guys have to be able to convey their vision, or to sell, to explain what they're doing really clearly, really fast, competently. And if they can sell to us, they can sell to anybody, which is good.
Okay, and I also wanted to ask you, I read about City Car, a car sharing company in which you've invested. What determined you to invest in this company?
So the City Car is a Luxembourg-based company where people have access to a vehicle on every street corner, and they can rent it by the hour. So the idea is that there's a number of hypotheses behind it. First is that the world is getting more and more congested, apartments are getting smaller in the cities, and there's no parking available for anybody. And owning a car, in the Western Europe at least, is no longer the aspirational thing that it used to be 20 years ago. And we came out at the end of, again, back in history, come out of the Second World War, and when everybody wanted a refrigerator, they wanted a car, the American dream, all of this stuff. Now, I mean, our kids don't even want a car, can't even give them a damn car if we wanted it. They're not interested in it. So they just want access to transportation, and that's what City Car provides, is transportation. When you can't use the bus, usually you live somewhere where the bus is on the way to the work, it's okay. But if you sometimes once a month, once a week, have to go to IKEA, you have to go to the, I don't know, garden center, you have to go and visit your mother in the village, then you rent a City Car for a few dollars, a few euro. The average rental's about 20 euro for the afternoon. And you can and you have no hassle about it. So there's a sort of a macro trend and then an execution trend of a team of people who actually know what they're doing within the car rental industry. And that's what we've got. We see that the same in Outfittery, which you're going to hear about, I think, on Friday, Thursday here, yeah. They're presenting, Hans-Jürgen's presenting their Luxembourg launch, which is interesting for a German company. And they are investing, again, the philosophy there is people don't have time to go to the store anymore, getting to the store is a hassle. So why not take advantage of the internet to buy clothes with a stylist using the video camera who can advise you what you should be wearing, what color clothes you should be wearing, and all of this kind of stuff. And the growth of e-commerce. Everybody in Western Europe has now performed an e-commerce transaction. So some of those issues that we saw 10, 15 years ago about adoption, credit card and stuff, it's not an issue anymore. People put their credit card on the internet. You don't have to convince them. So these macro trends are moving.
Michael, thank you very much for taking the time to do this interview. It's fascinating. I wanted to ask you a question from my perspective. So I'm running a company, hiring people now, fortunate enough to hire people. One of the ways that I've motivated people before to come and work for me is through a stock option plan. That lends itself to having access to the capital markets because you want to exit if it's not a trade sale. That's very difficult in Europe. So the mentality that I've met, and maybe I'm correct, but I'd like your view on this. The mentality I've met is people don't really understand stock option plans. They're not widely used. But also it's very difficult to get that access to the capital markets. There isn't the mentality of going public in Europe. So what are your thoughts in Mangrove on that, and how do you work with your entrepreneurs to help them attract the best talent without paying these enormous salaries that you need to pay locally?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things. The stock option plan, it's true, there isn't the wide adoption of stock option plans in business in Europe that there perhaps is in America. But there's a lot on the internet about it. People can understand it, for sure. I'm going to suggest that we've also got to divide America a little bit up. We have the sort of entrepreneurial attitude of Silicon Valley or wherever, and then if you go to Kansas or somebody, I think you'll find nobody's got a stock option plan. So it's also a little bit the same here. But stock option plans for me are a bonus for people, and it's good, and it allows a participation in the company. They get a feeling of being part of it as much as the economic benefit of the stock option plan. Stock options are taxed slightly differently in Europe as well to America, so they're not, you have to pay tax on them, whereas in America essentially you don't. But to attract staff is the same as attracting customers in anything. You have to present a vision of something which is going to make them happy when they're doing their daily work, make them secure, make sure, of course, they're motivated through the intellectual challenge is, of course, important, especially for younger people, and you pay them enough. For older people, I mean, obviously they need the money to survive. We're fortunate in Europe, the social security is good, but it's not so good that we want to lose our job and end up claiming the unemployment, right? So I think security is more important for people in Europe in general than it is in some parts of the United States. I mean, I was over in Silicon Valley recently, and it's a completely crazy market. If you're a software developer there, for example, and you're working in San Francisco, it's just crazy. You can change your job, well, 3 times a week, but you can change your job and still go to the same bus stop and be in the same building and have a new job. You know, it's so condensed, the environment there. So changing the job, if you just get bored with somewhere, there's a guy there, you're meeting him in the coffee shop, he says, come and work for me, and you don't even almost have to tell anybody, you don't have to change anything, whereas here, in Europe, you want to change, you almost have to move from Luxembourg to Paris or something, and that's a massive thing for everybody. We don't have that flexibility, so. You know, but you do get more reliable people as a result, right? Once people have joined your company here, they'll tend to stay rather than just move around every 5 minutes, which is the upside.
What's your most memorable failure, and what did you learn from it?
There are a lot of failures. Now, there's a couple of... They fall into, if you talk about the companies that failed as opposed to all the other failures I've had, they fall into 2 categories. One is the one where you're actually really, really disappointed because it should have been successful. You invested in a hypothesis, you invested in a team, and it just never worked out. And often they show early signs of growth, and through execution or through a variety of mess-ups, they don't work. And they're the most difficult ones. Funnily enough, they're also ones where you invest, and it just completely breaks. And they're less worrying in a perverse way because they just broke. It wasn't anything to do with us or anything. The other ones are more annoying because we've had good companies that have, or good ideas that even have had traction and have failed to really do what they should have done. And it's incredibly frustrating because you keep thinking, oh, if I was there, it'd be so much better. Of course it wouldn't, but you keep thinking that, and that's, yeah.
Is there a particular lesson you learned from a particular experience that's been with you, through your career?
A word of wisdom, I don't know. I think you learn from everything. I mean, this is going to say, I don't want to get too philosophical about that. That's too much for tonight. After a beer, we can go to philosophy. I'm not a philosopher, I'm an engineer. We tend to talk linearly.
Okay, and then our last question.
Thank you. I'm very glad to hear you because I founded a company here, The Markets Trust. We are a fintech company. We are hosted by BNP here in Lux Future Lab. So it's really warming my heart to know that you see future in our kind of startups. And I'm the crazy guy who don't know anything about banking. I hope my partner knows about banking. He comes from a big bank. So I hope, I trust he's doing, well, he knows what we're doing. I was wondering, when you have a portfolio company, I know that entrepreneurs, they always have new ideas to do more or to pivot or do something else. When do you decide that it's over? Or when do you think it's still worth to continue on one team?
Yeah, okay, so sometimes a company starts and then it changes its mind about what it does and wants to do something else. I think if the team is strong, then it's acceptable. If it's just somebody going around like this, not really knowing what to do. We tend to invest quite early in companies, or reasonably early. When we do that, we invest with a philosophy that this is what we're going to invest in. And unless it's wildly successful in a different route, we probably don't invest anymore. That means we don't stop the company. We don't. We're just the founder's there to do it. But I've got two diverging examples, exactly the same. Both of them were wanting to sell to different kinds of software to consumers, to end users. Both of which found out consumers didn't want to buy their software, but but perhaps businesses did, so they'd try. One of them has been wildly successful, and one of them has been a total disaster. Well, it just never managed to sell anything. And I think the path has been identical, and I think it's the execution again on the team of these things, which is truly where the difference comes. And we've continued to support the company that are doing well, obviously, and we continue to support emotionally, but not financially, the company which is doing badly. So, no, it's a shame. But I mean, I think the other thing when you asked about good investors or good money, I mean, when things go badly, which they do often, it's important to have somebody who's not going to shout at you too much about it. You know, you take things seriously. You have a responsibility to your investors to look after their money and deploy it, and it's perfectly acceptable to be angry, disappointed, all of those things when something doesn't work out, of course. But not to be. We're professionals. When it doesn't work out, we say goodbye, move on. We give the entrepreneur, I think every time, the most flexibility he can to move on. So if you have an idea which is going to change and say we're going to do something different, and go, okay, well, fine. We don't close the company or anything like that. We say, okay, well, off you go, do it, no problem. We won't help you, but everybody else will. Okay, and...
Yes, I have one question. What are your thoughts around the interactive entertainment and gaming industry? And in relation to that, do you believe that some of these valuations that were achieved lately by companies like Mojang, I think $2.5 billion for one game, Minecraft, or Candy Crush, for instance, do you think that this is justified in your view?
I think there's been three spectacular successes on the one-off gaming stuff essentially out of Scandinavia. Rovio with Angry Birds, which nobody plays anymore, or many people don't anyway. Candy Crush, the same, it's popular now, but King don't have a particularly strong follow-up portfolio and all of this. And Minecraft as well. Now, Minecraft's a little bit different, Mojang. The problem with games or the challenge with games as an investor is they're very much like films and things like that. You never know whether they're going to work or not. People put a lot of money into them. You have to develop them, and off they go. So we don't tend to be very keen on them just now. Minecraft, of course, was a privately owned company, basically 100% owned by the founder, who sold it for $3 billion or something, and bought the biggest house in Beverly Hills last week. So, young Swedish guy. And congratulations with him. And you can make a lot of money on these one-off projects for sure. But as an investment, I think they're tricky. And I think the investors who came into Rovio late, who came into King late, have not been lucky so far. Doesn't mean it's bad either. Rovio is a fantastic portfolio. The Angry Birds there, they're now moving. Their latest vision was presented to me the other week. I'm sure they wouldn't have told me if it wasn't. Okay, so it was about moving these animals, which have got a tremendous brand recognition against children and things like that, into the education sector and building tools and things around that. And that could be a fantastic company on that as well. I think it can be a great idea, very interesting. But as a venture, it's too A or B for us, at least. And we don't know anything about it either, which we don't know a lot about many things, but we certainly don't know anything about selecting popular games.
Good. Thank you. Thank you very much. That's it for today. I think that I pass the microphone to Steve.
Thank you very much. And I would like to invite you to give a big hand of applause. So that's one part of Startup Grind. The next part is we will queue again to the elevator. And then when you are lucky, one of those two guys in the elevator, you can do your elevator pitch up to the top floor. And again, many thanks for Lux Future Lab for hosting us and also for providing the top floor view. Thank you very much.